So, quickly the background, this is Bushbuck Ridge in South Africa. This is where I started doing my mobile phone work in 2003. I've been doing mobile phone development now for almost 8 years, and it's gone really, really quickly, and it's getting very, very exciting now. South African national parks are trying to figure out how mobile phones could be used to communicate with these communities. It's a very tough place to live, and a very tough place to work, and a very tough place to actually build technologies that work. You can imagine there's no electricity, no internet, there's mobile phone coverage, and that's the interesting thing, that mobile phones actually give us something to play with, and there's some very, very exciting things that we can do. But I always go back to this picture because it always challenges me to think, what kind of technologies can we build that not only work in a place like this, but also are useful to the people in the area? Because of course it's about finding things that work for the user, not just doing cool things with technology. So this was my starting point in 2003, forget the internet. And now clearly the internet's starting to spread, and you can now access the internet through mobile phones, and cables have arrived off the coast of Kenya, and very soon hopefully there'll be a lot of very fast broadband access on all these phones. But the starting point for me was always, SMS was the only thing that worked, and forget about the really smart, clever internet functionality. Unless you're working with a group of people that you can give phones to that can access that. But other than that, if you're trying to reach out to the general population, it's best to try and keep it simple. So the thinking behind FrontlineSMS really was the fact that in 2003, when I was starting my work, there were very few people building tools that worked in these tough places. Most of the tools required the internet, they required big servers, they required lots of money, they required IT experts, and it was not very easy for community healthcare workers or for hospitals or clinics to actually start to use mobile phones, because none of the tools worked for them. Basically, all the software is an SMS hub, and most of you will be pretty familiar with the setup. It's a piece of software driven by a laptop computer attached to a cable and a phone, or a USB modem, GSM modem as we prefer now. That's the actual phone I use when I develop the software. The idea came to me in early 2005. It wasn't something I went out in the field and suddenly thought, oh wow, let's build an SMS hub. It took me a couple of years to really understand the problems and the issues, and to come around to the idea that something like this could be useful. And I actually wrote it and launched it in October 2005, so it's pretty much now just over 5 years old. What it's designed to do is designed to allow non-profits who are interested in using mobile technology and whatever they're doing to just download, ideally, get a modem from a local shop or a phone, attach it to a computer they may have, and then just do whatever they want to do. I don't have all the answers to the problems that these non-profits are facing. They know what they want to do with the software. For me, it was important to build something that was flexible enough to let anybody who wanted to use SMS to just really have a platform that they could use to experiment and very, very cheaply and affordably play with. We hear about barriers to success being, maybe quite high. I think we need to make the barriers to failure, quite low, because it needs to be cheap to fail. You don't want to have to spend $5,000 on equipment to find out it's not going to work for you. You want to spend as little time and money as possible deciding whether a platform can work. Here's a quick few examples of how the tool's being used. So, Nigeria, Philippines, Malawi, Afghanistan, it's being used to help do citizen election monitoring. So these are grassroots NGOs who just wanted to do monitoring of their elections, and they wanted an SMS platform to collect text messages from wide numbers of people or groups of people, and to aggregate that data and then make some sense of it. In Zimbabwe, the first user, in fact, of FrontlineSMS was in Zimbabwe about 2 weeks after I launched the software. And it was very interesting at that time because it was mostly the activist community that were picking these tools up very, very quickly. If you're working in a country like Zimbabwe, or maybe a place with a very, very tough government, you want to be using all the tools you can to communicate in the most effective way and to try and circumvent government restrictions. We hear a lot now about the dangers of security and privacy issues around mobile phones. We're becoming more and more aware of the dangers of using this technology. But back in 2005, governments didn't really know much about how to handle these things, and it was still very, very early on. So in Zimbabwe, it was used to send messages to rural communities to give them news and information about what was going on in the country, and they could reply and give news on what was happening near them. A project which I really like, which is monitoring stockouts of drugs. These are clinics where you can't get commonly required drugs from clinics. So governments are claiming there's no problem, but actually there is a supply problem. And using an Ushahidi map, and many of you have probably come across Ushahidi, it's a crowdsourcing platform that allows you to aggregate data from multiple sources and to map it. They decided to use FrontlineSMS to basically get people to text in when they couldn't get essential drugs, and it was mapped on this map. So it's a nice use of SMS, an SMS gateway, and an internet service to actually get information from end users with very basic phones onto a map which can be seen globally. Afghanistan has been used to send security alerts to field workers. It's a pretty tough place to work, Afghanistan, so anything you can use to keep your staff safe, I think is very important. And bear in mind, all of these installations are just laptops and GSM modems sitting in local offices, and all of the ideas and all the uses are down to the user and not us. In Iraq, it's being used to send news around the country. The software supports Unicode, so you can send SMS in Arabic and Hindi and other foreign scripts, which is pretty important if you're dealing with literacy issues or obviously want to send messages in a local language. Being used by anti-trafficking projects in a number of countries, including Haiti now. And again, these are systems owned and run by local communities. I'm trying to take the technology as close as I can to where the problem is. And I think it's very easy to maybe have a system in the capital city which is run by a government department. But when you have that, you don't tend to have the local ownership that you get when you put a system in a community itself. In Malawi, it's running a rural healthcare network. I'll talk a bit more about this in a second. The interesting thing here was that this laptop, which was communicating with the community healthcare workers, a friend of mine, Josh Nesbitt, installed this, and within 6 months he went back and he did some work just to figure out what a simple SMS system could do in a rural community setting. And it was just quite staggering, actually, what the hospital managed to do with this. $3,500 saved in fuel, 1,000 hours of travel time saved. They managed to double the number of patients on a TV program. And it actually opened up a lot of people's eyes to the fact that very simple technologies can actually make a difference. You don't have to think big. You can actually build something very, very simple and have a very big impact. Kickstart Pumps are using it in Kenya and Tanzania to get information to farmers who are interested in buying their pumps. And Afghanistan, it was used to monitor the elections there. And when President Obama visited Ghana recently, it was used by US embassies to text people to tell them when to turn the radio on. So there's quite a few different types of uses there of the technology, and I think SMS has got a long way to go. I don't think we've by any means really exhausted the number of things we can do with SMS. This is our user map. It's in about 60 countries. This map's a bit old now, but I think it's so easy to replicate, at least we're trying to make it very easy to replicate and copy, that you actually get this kind of spread of use of the technology if you make it easy enough for people to do. It's been quite exciting to see that happen over 5 years. Online community where users can gather and help each other. I think this is one of our biggest achievements, to have a very, very solid user community, which is becoming very, very self-sufficient as well. And we don't get involved in that. We only step in if